I am the head of the Indian Law Resource Center, but I am also the delegate and representative of my own Indian nation, the citizen Potawatomi Nation. And my nation has joined together with more than 131 other indigenous governments, nations, and tribes, not just in North America, but in Central and South America as well. And as we have said before, this rather large group of indigenous governments and indigenous organizations has focused on 4 particular priorities, which I will mention again in a little more detail. But first, let me say that the zero draft is, as everyone has said, a basis for our continued work. But I want to say with perhaps a little more vehemence that unless it is improved, unless it is changed, unless it is more action-oriented, unless it includes more decisions or concrete commitments to actual action, it would be unsatisfactory as a conclusion or actual outcome document for the conference. I'm happy that nearly every speaker, both states and indigenous peoples, have made this observation. I only want to underline it with perhaps a little more strength, not to take away from the good qualities that the zero draft has. The particular priorities of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation and the group that we are a part of, these priorities, the top 2 are the same ones identified by the Global Coordinating Group. That is, the importance of having a body or a mechanism that can implement and monitor implementation of the Declaration. Secondly, it is important that indigenous peoples, particularly indigenous governments, be able to participate regularly in the United Nations. We are also especially concerned to see that the zero draft contains real action items to combat violence against indigenous women. That is something that absolutely must be strengthened, and I'm sure there will be many good recommendations about how to do that in addition to the ones that we have made. And fourth, the protection of indigenous sacred sites is especially important, and we want to underline that. Now, we are preparing specific language that we will submit within a few days, I hope, for inclusion in the zero draft. Our language is something like, and is perhaps consistent with, the recommendations of the Global Coordinating Group and the Arctic Caucus, but particularly as to implementation and monitoring, I think that the outcome document could say that the General Assembly recognizes or decides that such a body or mechanism is necessary for the achievement of the objectives of the Declaration, and it could then request perhaps the Secretary General or perhaps some other entity, request the Secretary General to consider restructuring the membership or composition of an existing body and provide an existing body with a new mandate. Or the Secretary General could perhaps conclude and propose that a new body, an entirely new body, be created. But there needs to be a resolution or a commitment to taking action on this matter relatively soon, certainly no later than, say, the 71st session of the General Assembly. Likewise, with respect to participation, the outcome document could recognize that indigenous peoples and their governments or representative institutions make unique and very valuable contributions to the work of the United Nations, and that Indigenous people should be accredited to participate in the United Nations on an ongoing basis, in a permanent manner. And the Secretary General could be requested to elaborate possible rules and processes for achieving this objective. I think this objective could be achieved perhaps at the 69th or at the latest the 70th session. I would think that time frames would be very valuable in the outcome document, particularly for those priorities. So as you can see, I believe there is wide agreement, certainly among Indigenous peoples and among many states that have spoken about these priorities, especially the top two priorities that I've mentioned, implementing and participation of Indigenous peoples. Of course, this is because these recommendations would do a great deal to protect all the rights and all the interests that are recognized and declared in the Declaration. I would like to be able to participate further and to make more specific comments in the afternoon session. Thank you very much for this opportunity.